She didn't hear the first car pull in. She heard the second. Then the third. Then the sound became something else entirely. A low, rolling thunder that had no business being in Millhaven, Wyoming, on a Tuesday night in February, when the temperature had dropped to 12 degrees and the highway had disappeared into white. Cassie Tide stood at the window of her diner with a dish towel in one hand and a half-empty coffee pot in the other, and she watched the headlights multiply in the parking lot like something out of a fever dream. Black, every single one of them. Black SUVs, heavy and silent, moving with a precision that felt too deliberate to be accidental. She counted. 3, 5, 8, 12, 15. The wind hit the window like a fist. She didn't step back. Her name was Cassie Tide. She was 34 years old, and she had crossed an ocean with $40 and a suitcase missing one wheel. And she had learned early, not from wisdom, but from necessity, that the thing that killed you was rarely the thing you feared. It was the thing you turned away from the door. So she put down the coffee pot, folded the dish towel over her shoulder, and walked to the door. She didn't know yet that this was the decision that would change everything. She just knew the cold was getting worse, and someone was standing in it. The diner was called the Roadside Stop, which was accurate and uninspired, but the sign came with the lease, and Cassie hadn't had money to replace it. What she had replaced was everything inside. The booths were mismatched but clean. The coffee was real. The food, on nights she had enough to cook, was the kind that made people go quiet in the way they go quiet, when something reaches them. Somewhere they'd forgotten was still open. Tonight she had almost nothing left in the kitchen. Half a case of eggs, 2 pounds of ground beef, frozen bread, a pot of stew she'd made from yesterday's vegetables and had been eating herself for 3 days. It was the end of the month. It was always the end of something. She had one customer before the SUVs arrived, a truck driver named Dale, who ate 2 plates of everything, paid in exact change, tipped $4, and drove back into the white like he'd never been there at all. Then the storm worsened. The highway emptied. Cassie was about to close up and go upstairs to the small apartment where Maya was doing homework. Maya, who was 11 years old, and Cassie's sister's daughter, and the quietest, most unsettling child Cassie had ever loved, when the black cars arrived. She opened the door. Cold came in like a wall. The men who stepped out were not men you forgot. They moved with a specific kind of control that Cassie recognized not from experience with power, but from instinct. The same instinct that had kept her alive in 3 different countries and 2 different languages. These were men who had learned to never be caught unready. 15 of them. Korean. Dressed in black wool and gray cashmere, wearing the kind of stillness that cost something to maintain. Not one of them rushed. The man who walked toward her first was not the largest. He was perhaps 40, lean in the way of someone who had never been soft, with a face composed into careful neutrality. His shoes, Cassie noticed, were not made for snow. None of their shoes were. He stopped 3 feet from the door. "Is this establishment open?" His English was precise, almost formal, the kind you learn from books before you learn it from people. Cassie looked past him at the 14 men standing in the blizzard. "It's about to close. We have traveled a long distance. The highway is no longer passable. We require shelter." She looked at him. He looked at her. The wind screamed between them. Something about the way he waited, not impatiently, not with pressure, just with the absolute stillness of a man accustomed to outcomes, going his way while being careful never to assume it, made her study him 1 second longer than she'd planned. That second told her something she couldn't name yet. "How many?" she said. 15. She had food for 6. The heating was unreliable. The lights had already flickered twice. "Come in," Cassie said. They came in the way water comes in, steady, organized, filling available space without spilling. 2 men went directly to the far corner booth. 3 took the stools at the counter. The rest distributed themselves through the diner in a pattern that took Cassie 40 seconds to understand. And when she understood it, something cold moved through her that had nothing to do with the open door behind them. They were covering every exit, not obviously, not sloppily. But the man near the front entrance was angled toward it. The two in the corner had sight lines to both the kitchen entry and the side window. The three at the counter could see the back hallway from where they sat. Cassie noticed, and she said nothing. She went behind the counter and started the coffee, because coffee was the one thing she had in abundance, and she needed something to do with her hands, while her mind ran calculations she didn't entirely trust. The man who'd spoken to her sat at the counter. Up close, he was more contained than she'd initially registered, like a room where everything had been put away, nothing out of place, but you could feel the weight of what was stored behind every closed door. "Thank you," he said, when she set the coffee in front of him. "Don't thank me yet. I need to see what I have to feed 15 people. We don't require much." "With respect," Cassie said, "you'll eat whatever I make, and you'll be grateful for it." Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, and something more private, the expression of a man who'd been spoken to a certain way so rarely that, when it happened, he didn't quite know where to put it. "Agreed," he said. She went into the kitchen. She didn't look back. But she heard him pick up the coffee cup, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she found herself listening for that small sound long after she'd reached the stove. Upstairs, Maya heard the cars before Cassie opened the door. She heard them the way she heard most things. Before they were announced, before they were obvious, in the register other people called imagination, and Maya called attention. She was sitting at the desk by the window, with a library book open in front of her, but she'd stopped reading 20 minutes ago when the storm changed pitch, and her body sent a signal she couldn't name but always trusted. So she went to the window. 15 black SUVs in the parking lot. Maya counted them twice, noted the positioning, noted how the men moved when they stepped out. Controlled, economical, no wasted motion. Noted the man near the third vehicle from the left, who moved fractionally slower than the others. His left arm held slightly closer to his body. He was protecting something on his right side. Injured. Right ribs. She went back to her desk and opened her notebook. Small, blue, the kind with graph paper inside because she preferred the grid. She wrote 3 things. 1. Injured man, third vehicle from left. Right ribs. 2. All vehicles parked facing outward. Departure ready. 3. No one is speaking. She looked at what she'd written. Then she added a 4th line. 4. They came here knowing they might need to leave fast. This was not an accident stop. She picked up her pencil and went downstairs. "Maya," Cassie's voice came through the kitchen pass-through. "Go back upstairs." "I'm not tired," Maya said, which was not an answer to what Cassie had said. She sat in the booth closest to the kitchen, best sightline to the full diner, and opened her library book. The men noticed her the way adults noticed children assessed as non-threatening. Briefly. Then not at all, except for the man at the counter. He looked at her for a moment that was a fraction longer than the others, not unkindly. More like he was running the same kind of calculation she was. Maya looked back at him without blinking. He returned to his coffee first. She noted that too. Cassie made the most of nothing. She stretched the stew with hot water and the remaining vegetables from the walk-in, seasoned it with everything on the spice rack that made sense, and served it with bread, toasted thick in butter, because texture mattered when ingredients were few. She scrambled the eggs in batches, 2 more dozen discovered in the back she hadn't counted, and added the browned ground beef, seasoned and folded in, so the whole thing held together like something deliberate. It wasn't a feast, but it was food that told you someone had thought about you while making it, and that was worth more than the ingredients themselves. Cassie's mother had taught her that. It was the one lesson she'd carried across every border without losing a single word of it. One of the younger men stood to help her carry plates. She glanced at the man at the counter. The younger man sat back down. "I don't need help serving," Cassie said to the room, "but whoever wants more coffee can ask." Silence. Then, from the corner booth, one of the older men said something in Korean, something that made two others exhale. Not quite a laugh, but the first sound anyone had made that wasn't functional. She looked at the man at the counter. What did he say? He said the food smells like his grandmother's kitchen. Is that a compliment? In our culture, the man said, it is the highest one. Cassie considered this. Tell him he's welcome, the man translated. The older man, perhaps 60, gray at his temples, a face that had weathered things she'd never know the names of, bowed his head slowly. Cassie turned back to the kitchen before her face could do something she'd regret. But she stood at the stove for 3 extra seconds before she started washing the pan. She didn't examine why. She still didn't know his name. He was still at the counter when she came back out, his coffee half finished, and she noticed he'd barely touched his stew. She noticed because she noticed everything about her kitchen, the way a person notices the interior of a place they've built from almost nothing. You don't like it, she said. It's not that. Then what? He set down the spoon, looked at it for a moment like it had said something he needed to consider. I find it difficult to accept things when I don't understand their cost. It cost me eggs and yesterday's vegetables. You have the full accounting. That's not... I know what you meant. She leaned on the counter. Where I come from, you feed people because they're hungry. That's the whole calculation. Everything else is noise. He looked at her then, really looked, in the specific way of someone who has encountered something they didn't plan for. Where are you from? Nigeria. You? Seoul. Long way from home, she said. Yes, he said quietly. Both of us. The diner was loud with wind and silence at once. 15 men eating around them, none of them speaking, the storm pressing against every window. Your name, she said. Seo Ji-hwan. Cassie tied. He looked at her for a beat longer than the exchange required. She picked up his spoon and placed it back in his hand. Eat, Ji-hwan. Something moved through his expression, quick, unguarded, gone in under a second. The controlled surface reassembled itself almost immediately, but she'd seen the moment underneath it. She filed it away and went to check on the rest of her tables. Something in that exchange will settle in your chest and stay there. A woman with almost nothing, feeding 15 strangers in a blizzard, not from abundance, but from the part of herself that simply couldn't do otherwise. If that kind of quiet strength moves you, you already know you're in the right place. This channel is built for people who recognize that kind of courage, not the loud kind, the kind that costs something real. Subscribe before the next scene, because what happens in the next hour is going to change every single person in that diner, and you'll want to have been here from the beginning. The storm doubled itself around 8 o'clock. The power flickered 3 times in 10 minutes. On the 3rd flicker, it held off for 6 seconds that felt much longer. When it came back, the emergency generator groaned to life, working, but only just. Cassie lit candles while she waited to see if the generator would hold. In the candlelight, the 15 men looked different, less controlled, more human. They ate the way people eat when they're genuinely tired. Heads lowered, focused, grateful in the way that doesn't announce itself. The older man in the corner had his eyes closed between bites. The young one who'd tried to help her was looking at nothing with the expression of someone holding himself at a specific distance from his own thoughts. Cassie refilled cups without asking. It was the thing she did. She was on her second pass when she noticed the older man, the one from the corner booth, and the one who'd smelled the grandmother's kitchen in her food, was watching her. Not with suspicion, with something more complicated. His eyes tracked her movement through the diner, and there was a recognition in them that had nothing to do with her personally. He said something quietly to the man beside him. She didn't catch it, but she felt it. The specific weight of being truly seen by someone who understood something about you that you hadn't said out loud. She kept moving. By 9 o'clock, Cassie had stopped pretending they might leave. The highway signs had disappeared into white. The temperature outside was dropping, not holding. She stood at the window for 30 seconds and understood with her whole body that no one was going anywhere until morning. She had 4 spare blankets, she had the booths, and she had the ugly garage sale rug that she loved for reasons she'd never been able to justify aesthetically. She went to Ji Huan. "You're staying," she said. It wasn't a question. The road is gone. You're staying." She pulled a stool back from the counter. "I have 4 blankets. I'll bring them down. The booths are wide enough to sleep in if you're not particular." He looked at her. In his expression, and she was learning to read it in layers now, the way you read a language after weeks of immersion. There was something that moved quickly and then was covered again. "We have supplies in the vehicles. Your vehicles are outside in a blizzard. We can use what I have," Cassie said. "Tomorrow, you get whatever you need from your cars. Tonight," she paused, "tonight you're just people who needed somewhere to be. That's all this has to be." The quality of his stillness changed, not toward action, toward something slower. "You're very direct," he said. "I'm tired, and it's 9 o'clock, and I've been awake since 4 in the morning," she said. "I don't have the energy for anything else." That thing moved across his face again, quick, unguarded, almost a smile. Almost. "Then I'll be direct also. Thank you, Cassie. For all of it." She nodded once and went to get the blankets. She was halfway to the storage closet before she realized her pulse had done something slightly irregular in the last 30 seconds. She told herself it was the generator fluctuation. She didn't fully believe herself. Maya had been watching the injured man for 41 minutes. He was in the second booth from the back, eating slowly, so his posture subtly wrong in the way she'd cataloged from the window. She'd corrected her initial assessment. It wasn't his left arm. It was his right ribs. The left side compensation was protective, not symptomatic. He was perhaps 55. Gray at his temples. A face that had seen things, as the expression went, though Maya always thought that was an imprecise way of saying a face that had absorbed impact and continued functioning. He was eating. He was careful. He had said 3 words to the man beside him since they arrived, and he was kind. That was the thing Maya hadn't expected, and it lodged in her chest the way unexpected data always did. Not unpleasantly, just insistently, demanding integration. When the young man who'd tried to help Cassie had knocked over a water glass earlier, so the injured man had simply and quietly reached over and righted it before anyone else reacted. No expression, no comment, just the automatic reflex of someone for whom small kindnesses were habitual. Maya wrote in her notebook, "The injured man is kind. This complicates things." She looked at that sentence for a moment. Then she looked at the man. Then she went back to her library book, though she read the same paragraph 3 times without retaining it. She didn't know yet that in approximately 4 hours, that small observation would matter more than anything else she wrote tonight. She found out about the injury by accident. She was bringing a blanket to the back booth and came around the corner as the young man who'd tried to help earlier was speaking to the injured man in a low, urgent voice. The injured man had his jacket partially open. The young man was checking something beneath his shirt with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it before. Cassie stopped. The young man's head snapped up. The injured man looked at her. No alarm, just assessment. The look of someone deciding how much a situation required. "I trained as a nurse's assistant," Cassie said. 2 years. I can look at it properly if you want." A pause. The young man glanced at the injured man. The injured man considered her for a moment, then said something in Korean. "He says that would be acceptable," the young man said. She went to the kitchen for the first aid kit under the sink. When she came back, the injured man had his shirt raised enough to show the bruising across his right ribs. Deep purple and green, the colors of something that had been struck with force and recently. "When?" she asked. "This morning." She pressed carefully, feeling for displacement. He breathed through it without flinching. "Nothing punctured. You've been careful with it." She reached for the ace bandage. This won't fix it, but it'll ease the breathing. She wrapped him efficiently. His eyes tracked her hands while she worked, not anxiously, with the attention of someone who respected competence. When she finished, he said something. He says, the young man translated, his voice quieter now, that you have the hands of someone who has spent a long time taking care of people. Cassie sat back, looked at the injured man directly. He looked back with something in his expression that she felt before she understood. A warmth that was genuine, unperformed. The warmth of someone for whom gratitude was not a social gesture, but a real thing. Get some rest, she said. He nodded slowly, settled back. She picked up her kit and walked back to the kitchen, and she was almost through the door when the young man said quietly, "His name is Choi Byung-soo. He's been with us for 9 years. He's a good man." Cassie paused, didn't turn around. "Good," she said. "Then he deserves to sleep." She didn't know why that sentence stayed with her. She should have let it go. She didn't. Maya was not asleep. She was at her window with the light off, notebook open, watching the parking lot. This was the thing about Maya that adults called excessive, and that Maya called necessary. She understood that things continued to happen after people decided they were over. The storm was over in the sense that everyone had come inside. The night was settled in the sense that blankets had been distributed and the generator was holding. The situation was contained in the sense that no one was using that word, but everyone seemed to be acting as though it applied. Maya did not believe things were contained. At 9:47, a car she didn't recognize drove slowly past the diner entrance. Not one of the 15 black SUVs, smaller, silver. Moving carefully in the snow, not struggling, careful. There was a difference. She wrote it down. At 10:12, it came back. At 10:29, it came back again. This time, it slowed further. The driver, she couldn't see clearly, only shapes, was not looking at the road. The intervals between passes, 25 minutes, then 17. Shortening. Maya closed her notebook. She had been told twice to go to bed. She had gone upstairs both times. She was technically upstairs now. She went to the top of the stairs and looked down at the diner below. "Cassie," she said, "a silver car has driven past 3 times. Cassie turned the radio off. First pass 9:47, second 10:12, third 10:29. The intervals are shortening. Maya stood in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas and rubber grip socks, notebook in hand, entirely calm. The third time, the driver was looking at the diner specifically, not at the road. Cassie looked at her, looked at the diner beyond the kitchen, at 15 men arranged in the specific pattern of exits covered. "Maya, the interval shortening means someone is getting closer to a decision," Maya said. "That's not a pattern I constructed, and that's how decisions work." Cassie was quiet. "You should tell him," Maya said. "Go to bed." "You should tell the man at the counter." "Maya, bed." Maya went to the doorway, paused with one hand on the frame. "If I'm wrong, all you've lost is 30 seconds. She looked back. "If I'm right." "Bed," Cassie said. Maya went upstairs. Cassie stood in the kitchen for a long moment, dish towel in her hand, the hum of the generator the only sound. Then she went to find Ji-hwan. He was in the last booth, not because anyone had directed him there, because it had the best sightline to both doors. He was sitting with a phone in his hand, screen dark, not using it, just holding it, thinking in the way she was learning to recognize, completely still, completely present. The engine running at full capacity behind eyes that gave nothing away. So she had the sense, looking at him, that whatever calculations were running in his mind were several layers deeper than anything currently visible in the room. She sat down across from him. "A silver car," she said, keeping her voice below the ambient generator hum. "Mid-size, American, 3 passes, 9:47, 10:12, 10:29. Intervals shortening. Third pass, the driver was watching the building. He went very still. Not the controlled stillness of before, a different quality, denser. The stillness of something that has just received information it already suspected, but hoped was wrong. "Who told you?" "My niece. She was at her window." He looked toward the stairs, then back at her. She timed the intervals. She times everything. He was quiet for a moment. That felt like several things happening simultaneously beneath the surface. "This wasn't our planned route. The storm changed it. So no one should know you're here." "Correct." "Except someone does." "Correct." She held his gaze. "Which means the information came from inside your group." He looked at her, not with surprise, with the expression of someone who has reached a conclusion they'd been avoiding and found it confirmed in a quarter they hadn't expected. "You're quick," he said. "I run a diner by myself at the end of the world," she said. "You develop instincts, or you don't survive." She leaned forward slightly. "What do you need?" He stood. "Stay inside, and away from windows." "This is my building. I know. I'm not decoration in it." He looked at her with something she couldn't entirely read. Something between acknowledgement and a kind of frustration that wasn't directed at her so much as at the situation for having made her necessary in a way that cost her. "Cassie, tell me what you need," she said, specifically. A pause. Something shifted in his face. The door opened another inch. "A back exit. One that doesn't face the road or the main lot. Storage door, back field, faces north." "Show me." She showed him. He looked at the dark field beyond the door, nothing visible through the white except more white. And something in his expression changed. Not relief. More like the specific satisfaction of a person who has found a margin they didn't know they had. "Good," he said. "You're planning your options," she said. He looked back at her. "I'm always planning my options." She was very close to him in the narrow doorway, the cold coming up through the gap at the base of the storage door, and she became aware of the distance between them in the specific way you become aware of distances when they've quietly shortened without your noticing. She stepped back. He didn't comment on it, but he noticed. She was certain he noticed. Maya was not at her window. She was watching the man near the back hallway. He was young, perhaps 30, and he'd barely spoken since they arrived, not even in Korean. He held his body the way the others held their bodies, disciplined, exit-aware, present. But the quality of his stillness was different in a way Maya had been trying to articulate to herself for the last 20 minutes. So the others were still in the way of people managing a wait. He was still in the way of someone listening for something specific. She watched his head. It was angled, very slightly, almost imperceptibly, toward the east wall. She looked at the east wall. She looked back at him. She looked at her notebook entry from earlier. Silver car. Passed east of the building. Watching. The man was facing the wall that the car was parked beyond. Maya wrote, "He knows where the car is without looking." She stared at that sentence. Then she wrote, "Second problem." She got up quietly, didn't look at him directly. She'd learned early that certain adults noticed when children studied them, and the ones who noticed were usually the ones you needed to study most carefully, and went to find Cassie. Cassie was in the kitchen. Jihuan was at the window, on lights off, watching the lot. Maya stood in the kitchen doorway until Cassie saw her. Cassie came over. Maya showed her the notebook, open to the last page. Back hallway man, listening toward east wall, not watching the room. He knows where the car is without looking. Second problem. Cassie read it twice. Her face didn't move much, but her eyes did. A quick calculation running behind them that Maya recognized, because it was the same calculation she'd already run. "Are you certain?" Cassie said, her voice barely above breath. "No," Maya said. "Certain is for math. But if I'm wrong, you lose 30 seconds again." Cassie looked at her for a moment. Then she folded the notebook page corner and handed it back. "Upstairs," she said. "Cassie." "I have it from here," Cassie said. And then, quietly, with something in her voice that she didn't often let out, "You did good. You did really good. Now let me do the next part." Maya looked at her. Something passed between them that had no words. Maya went upstairs. Cassie went to Ji-hwan. She touched his arm briefly, not grabbing, just contact, the universal signal of a private word. And he turned. She kept her voice at the level of breath. "The man near your back hallway. Kim Jae-won. How long?" He didn't ask her how she knew the name. 4 years. 4 years enough to trust completely? A pause. His eyes moved. Micro movement toward the hallway, then back. What did Maya see? She says he's angled toward the east wall, listening for something outside. She says he knows where the car is without looking at it. The quality of his stillness changed again, that denser register she was learning to read. That car is parked east of the building. Yes. A silence that had weight, several things running beneath it. Byung-soo placed the tracker, he said, almost to himself. Jae-won confirmed position. He stopped. "I need to look at something," he paused. "Without looking like I'm looking. Can you do that?" "It's most of what I do," he said. He moved back into the diner, unhurried, the posture of someone returning to a coffee cup. Cassie stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him move through the room, refill his own cup, exchange a brief word with the young man at the counter, pause near the window. And in that pause, his gaze swept the room in the way of someone taking inventory, the kind of sweep that was over before you knew it had happened. He came back. "She's right," he said. The 2 words landed quietly, but Cassie felt them in her sternum. "Can you handle both of them?" she said, "without the people outside knowing something has changed? I've done harder with less time, without hurting either of them." He looked at her. The look lasted long enough that she understood it was a real look, not a controlled one. He was actually considering the question, not just managing her expectation of the answer. "Byung-soo wrapped his ribs today," he said quietly. "I watched you do it. He thanked you with his eyes before he thanked you with words." He paused. "I know what he is. I also know what he was for 9 years. Those things aren't separate." Another pause. "He'll be unharmed. Both of them." She believed him. But she didn't know why she believed him so completely, except that she'd been reading people since she was 16 years old in a Lagos market, and learning which faces meant what they said, and his face meant it. "Then do what you need to do," she said. "I'll keep the lights where they are." What happened next, Cassie did not watch. She stood in the kitchen and kept her hands busy, wiped down the counter, checked the generator panel, made more coffee, and she listened to the quality of silence from the diner, the way you listen to a building in a storm. Not for specific sounds, but for the absence of sounds that should be there. 2 controlled silences in 20 minutes. 2 different corners of the room. When Ji-hwan returned, his face was closed, the lights-off room, and she didn't try to open it. "Confirmed," he said. "Soentuanto. Byung-soo? Unharmed. Restrained." He paused. "His daughter is ill. The treatment required money he didn't have. Someone offered him a solution." Cassie was quiet. "He did it to save her," she said. "He betrayed 14 people who trusted him." "I know. I said he did it to save her. I didn't say it was right." He looked at her for a moment with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Something that was almost raw, controlled almost to the point of invisibility, but not quite. A grief, maybe. The specific grief of a person whose loyalty has been the measure of their whole life, discovering that 9 years can be bought. He looked away. He hadn't done that before. Looked away from her. She let it be. "J1, she said after a moment. "Recruited 18 months ago. Money and conviction. The more stable combination." He set his phone on the counter. "The external threat knows our location but is waiting. They want us asleep, isolated, window open. They don't know the window has closed. How long until your people arrive?" His phone lit up before he answered. He looked at it, answered in Korean. 4 words, a pause, 2 more. He set it down. 22 minutes, he said. Cassie looked at the clock above the counter. 3:41 in the morning. Coffee, she said. Something moved across his face. Relief and something else. Something warmer. Moving quickly beneath the controlled surface like light under water. Please, he said. Here's the question I keep coming back to. Byung-soo spent 9 years earning trust, and then spent it for a reason that was completely human and completely unforgivable at the same time. What would you have done? Not what you think you should have done. What you would have actually done. Drop your answer below. I understand him, or there's no excuse. There is no wrong answer here. There's only the honest one. The people in this comment section are not here for comfortable answers. And if this story is the kind that makes you think past the easy response, subscribe. This channel is built entirely for you. The 22 minutes were the longest of the night. Not because of danger. The danger, paradoxically, had become more legible now. Named. Contained. The silver car was still east of the building, but it was waiting for a signal it was never going to receive. And that made it a known quantity, which was almost a relief after hours of navigating unknowns. What made the minutes long was something else. Ji-hwan sat at the counter and she stood behind it, and they talked, for the first time, without the filtration of crisis running through every word. 9 years, she said. Byung-soo. 9 years, he confirmed, and you didn't see it. No. Does that happen often? Missing something. He looked at his coffee cup, a long look. Less than it used to. More than I'd like. That's honest. You asked an honest question. She leaned on the counter. What was it like when you confirmed it? He was quiet for a moment. She thought he might redirect, change the subject, offer the controlled version. Instead, he looked up and said flatly, like something I'd trusted for a long time, turned out to be a different shape than I thought. He paused. Not smaller, just different. Wrong dimensions. She looked at him. That's a precise way to say a painful thing, she said. I've had practice with precision, he said. And then, quietly, the words arriving carefully, like he was paying attention to each one before releasing it. Less practice with the pain. The generator hummed. The wind had dropped to something bearable. Somewhere in the diner, one of the men was breathing in the slow pattern of actual sleep. Where I come from, Cassie said, we say, a person who has never been betrayed, has never been trusted enough. She paused. It doesn't make it hurt less, but it means something about what you had before it. He looked at her with the expression she'd been seeing in fragments all night, the one that lived underneath the controlled face, that surfaced in brief intervals and was gone before it could be identified. But it stayed a beat longer this time. How are you this way? He said. What way? This. He stopped, started again. This anchored, as though the world keeps trying to move you and you simply refuse. Cassie thought about $40 and a suitcase wheel and 3 countries and years of refusals. I didn't have the option of being unanchored, she said, so I stopped thinking of it as an option. He was very still. Also, she said, I have a 12-year-old upstairs who would notice immediately if I started drifting. It keeps you honest. That almost laugh again, closer than the times before. Not quite arriving, but she could feel the shape of it now. His phone rang. They're here, he said. She heard them before she saw them, a sound that built from the highway like weather, like something with mass moving through the clear dark. Then the headlights, not one set, not 5, not 15, many. Ji-hwan spoke to his men, short, declarative, the voice of someone who had been the organizing point of large forces for a long time. The room moved with the fluency of deep practice. Men who had been sleeping were alert. Men who had been watching were repositioning. Cassie stood at the window, The silver car, somewhere east of the building, did not appear. She understood it wouldn't. She stood there and watched the vehicles arrive until she stopped counting. And then she stood there a little longer. And then she sat down in the nearest booth, because her legs, which had been holding her up for 14 hours, had apparently decided they'd held enough. She sat there. She breathed. She looked at the diner. The ugly rug, with the mismatched booths, the coffee pot she'd had for 7 years, the sign that said, "The roadside stop," in letters she'd always meant to replace. And she felt the weight of the night settle into her bones, like it had been waiting for her to stop moving before it landed. She was still sitting there when Ji-hwan came and sat across from her. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. The generator ticked. The new vehicles filled the lot. Outside, controlled voices in Korean, organized and efficient. "You should sleep," he said finally. "Probably," she said. "But you won't yet." "Probably not." He looked at her across the table, not with urgency, not with strategy, just looking, in the way of someone who has decided to be somewhere and is no longer performing the decision. "When this is over," he said carefully, "when the morning comes and—" He stopped. She could see him choosing. "There are things I'd like to tell you, when it's quieter." She looked at him. "About what?" she said. "About—" A pause. Something behind his eyes moved, and was controlled, and was almost not controlled. "Several things." She held his gaze. "Then tell me in the morning." "Yes." "When it's quieter." "Yes." The distance between them at the table was not large. She was aware of it in the way she'd been aware of it in the storage doorway, the specific quality of a distance that has changed without announcement. She didn't move. Neither did he. "Go make sure your men are settled," she said. "I'll be here." He stood. Paused. "Cassie." "Ji-hwan. Thank you." And then, with something in his voice she hadn't heard in it before, unfiltered, brief, unreal. "For all of it. The door and the stew and the—" He stopped himself. "All of it." She nodded once. "Go." He went. She sat in the booth for another 5 minutes, alone in her diner with the sound of the storm that was finally breaking, and she let herself feel the weight of what the night had cost, and what it had given in the same motion. Then she put her head on her folded arms, and slept. She didn't see the sun come up. She woke to Maya sitting across from her, notebook open, pencil moving, library book set aside in favor of a tablet that had not existed in their household yesterday. "Where did that come from?" Cassie said. "One of the men left it, with a note." Maya turned it over. On the back, in precise handwriting, "For the one who doesn't sleep." Cassie looked at it. "He means you," Maya said helpfully. "I know who he means. You were asleep before I was. He must have meant me. Maya. Logically. Maya." Cassie sat up, looked out the window, and stopped. The parking lot was full. Not 15 SUVs, 135. She counted them twice. The number was the same. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Maybachs, vehicles she had no names for because she'd never had occasion to learn them. All black. Arranged through the cleared lot and along the highway shoulder and up the access road in a formation that had the quality of something organized rather than arrived. Standing beside each vehicle, men in dark coats, not moving. At the center of the lot, facing the diner door, stood Seo Ji-hwan. Cassie stood up from the booth, smoothed the front of her apron, adjusted the dish towel over her shoulder. She walked to the door and opened it, and the cold was different from last night's cold. Morning cold, clean and sharp. The specific quality of air after a storm has fully broken, and the world has been washed into clarity. She stepped out. The snow crunched loudly under her feet in the silence of 135 men not moving. She walked to him. "This is a considerable number of cars," she said. "Yes," he said, "for a relatively small parking lot." "I noticed. I have almost no food." "We brought our own." She looked out at the assembled vehicles, the men beside them, all of them oriented toward her, and she felt something she couldn't immediately name. Not fear, not precisely awe. Something that lived between those two things, in the territory of understanding that your life has, in the night just past, rearranged itself permanently, and without asking permission. She turned back to Ji Huan. "Why?" she said. He looked at her steadily. "Because you sheltered 15 strangers with yesterday's vegetables and a dish towel. Because your niece is the most alarming 11-year-old I have ever encountered in a life that has contained many alarming people. And because," he paused. Something moved in his expression that he didn't try to cover this time. "Because what happened in this building last night deserves to be witnessed by everyone it affected." She looked at the assembled men. "They all know. By sunrise? Yes. That's a lot of people to know my name. It is. I'm not sure I wanted that. I know." He held her gaze. "But the things worth doing rarely ask permission." She stood in the morning light outside her diner with 135 men behind him, and she felt the $40 and the missing suitcase wheel and the 3 countries and all the years of opening doors when it would have been easier to keep them closed, and she looked at Seo Ji Huan and said, "You still owe me for the eggs." The laugh that came out of him was real and sudden and completely uncontrolled. Not the almost smile, not the managed exhale, a real laugh, and it changed his face entirely. And she thought, there it is. That's the one underneath. "Yes," he said, still recovering. "I do." Behind her, the diner door opened. Maya stood on the threshold in her pajamas and rubber grip socks, tablet under one arm, notebook in hand, looking out at the 135 vehicles with the expression of someone whose data has been confirmed. "I calculated approximately 100, she said. "I was slightly low." Ji Huan looked at her. "The subunit logic." Maya looked at him with mild surprise, the expression of someone encountering an intellect that has kept pace. Parent structures respond to threats. "Yes. You were 35 off. I'll recalibrate. I can help with that," he said. Maya studied him for a moment with the forensic attention she brought to everything. "Can you get me a microscope? A real one, not one for children." Ji Huan glanced at Cassie. Cassie covered her mouth with one hand. "I'll see what I can do," he said. "And Mandarin lessons," Maya said. "Before Korean, larger population base." "Mandarin first," he agreed. Then Korean." Agreed. Maya looked at the parking lot one more time, made a note, and went back inside. Cassie turned back to Ji Huan. He was looking at her. Not at the diner. Not at the assembled vehicles. At her. "You said there were things you wanted to tell me," she said, when it was quieter. He glanced at the 135 cars. "This is not quieter," he said. "No," she agreed. "But it's morning." He looked at her. The morning light was on both of them. Somewhere behind her, inside the diner, the coffee pot had started. Maya, apparently, had figured out the machine. "Then in the morning," he said. "Yes," she said, and they stood together outside the roadside stop in the February light, with 135 witnesses and the smell of coffee and the specific stillness of 2 people who have come through something and arrived somewhere they didn't plan for and are choosing, carefully and deliberately, to stay. If you made it here, through the storm and the tracker and the betrayal and the morning light, then you know something about the kind of stories this channel tells. Not tidy ones. Not ones where the good people are obviously good from the start. The ones where kindness is complicated and courage is quiet, and love arrives disguised as a dish towel and yesterday's stew. This community is built for people who stay for the whole story. If that's you, subscribe. Not because you have to, because you've earned the library. Go drop in the comments. What line stayed with you? What moment hit? And if there's someone in your life who would have opened that door in that snowstorm, share this with them. They'll know exactly why you sent it.